Where did you get him? Is he yours?
Is she adopted? She's so exotic.
Are you the nanny?
Are you the babysitter?
What are you?
What are you? Questions like these for biracial people and their families are constant. They can be curious and charming. They can be hostile and dismissive. They can be aggressive and hateful, but they never really go away.
No matter how you ask the questions, the message is clear to biracial people. Where do you belong, and do you really belong anywhere?
So America has always been a little strange about race mixing, to put it mildly. But this year is actually a milestone anniversary for civil rights in America, for those of you that don't know. This year is the anniversary of Loving versus Virginia, actually just this month, which allowed, for the first time, people of different races to marry. But the important thing about these laws was that these were not just about romance or procreation. They were actually the foundation of our segregationist legacy of Jim Crow laws. And in fact, in the final oral arguments for the case, they were referred to as the most odious of the segregation and slavery laws.
But it still took another 33 years for mixed-race people to be counted on the census in the year 2000. The mixed-race population is growing at 3 times the rate as the general population. But as we know, if we remember our racist history of slavery, race mixing has always been happening.
Okay, so here we have these pictures of these biracial people. We really fetishize them a lot in our culture. So biracial people are fetishized for being beautiful and exotic. It almost ignores their humanity and ignores the rest of their personhood. So on the one hand, we ask them continually what they are, which is a dehumanizing form of othering. On the other hand, we simply erase half of their identities when we ask them constantly what they are and try to place them into one box or another. But it occurred to Leena and me that what all of us don't try to do, perhaps, is to understand their unique experiences, this very unique lens and piece of racial justice in America. And so this is where our journey begins, Leena and I together. And for both of us, it's really personal, actually.
So Caty and I, we discovered a few years ago that we both have this in common, that we're in interracial families. And this is how we discovered it. I had just finished a piece, a video installation called I'm Not the Nanny, because I'm not the nanny, I'm the mom. And she heard about it. And we worked together. She stopped me in the hall, and she grabbed me, and she pulled me into her office and said, "Here," and showed me a picture of her kids. And I immediately recognized that they were biracial. So pretty shortly after that, we started to talk, and we realized that we kind of bonded very quickly over the questions we had as being parents of biracial people. We realized that our own racial identities were not significant enough to understand the experiences that our kids might have. So we had a couple questions that we thought about. We wanted to know, do families that are monoracial, that are the same race, do they have the same experiences that we do, and what are those kinds of differences? We also wanted to know how the world sees our children and sees them in culture and as people. And ultimately, we wanted to learn what we could do as parents to help better our children's identity formation.
So we always start this part of our journey by explaining our own racial backstories, because obviously Leena and I are not the same, so I feel that I should tell you that I'm white. Yes, I am white. My family is from the Deep South, but actually that's significant to say that I'm white, because what I realized from that is that I've never been the victim of racial discrimination. I've never been asked what I'm doing in a particular neighborhood. I've never been asked, what are you, where do you belong, where are you from? I've never felt any of those things. But when I had my children, my biracial brown children, it is the most transformative experience of my life because of how deeply I see and understand race through a different lens. And here I think it's important that I say to you that I don't think this is an achievement. I don't think this is something I should get a pat on the back for. This is not a hero label. But I'm honest with you when I say that I see race very differently and I move through the world differently. And I understand that having brown skin means 1,000 different moments in a day where you feel race. So there are moments now that I understand with my son, when he plays with other boys of color and there are clear cases of subconscious bias happening. They're treated differently. There are cases with my daughter who has been asked so many times what she is and been told that she's exotic that she's actually developed a bit of a comedy routine to respond to it. So just a couple months ago, the latest person said, "Oh, you're so exotic." And she said, "Am I endangered like a white tiger at the zoo?" Just kind of shut the whole thing down. It's pretty hilarious. So the lens is very different, and it's something that is earned and needs to be learned.
So I grew up in a very small town in Ohio, so small that we were one of the first immigrant families there. And the newspaper did an article about us. Welcome immigrants, right? But this came with the backlash. So one of my earliest memories is actually walking home from school and a kid yelling out the bus window, "Where's your green card?" And I answered, "At home with my mom, where's yours?" I didn't know that that was meant to be an insult. But this is where our stories differ a little, right? So that story illustrates why I, as a brown woman in America, have been thinking about race from an early age, and it encompasses everything that I do. One thing that surprised me when I had my son is half white, was now I discovered that I had to really start to think and learn about whiteness, and especially his white privilege, because that's something that I never had.
So here's what Leena and I decided to do. So we decided after we met a couple of times and we had so many of the same questions, like what should we be learning about our children's development? What kinds of things should we teach them? How do we prepare them for particular things? Do they actually have a uniquely different experience than other people? And so we decided, because Leena and I are also documentary filmmakers, we decided to take our questions on the road to film a documentary. And really, this is our journey through the United States at this moment to ask and listen and learn about what the biracial experience is like 50 years after a landmark law, but at a moment it turns out that is not at all post-racial. So here are just a few highlights of our journey.
Can I ask you a question?
What?
Describe mommy. What color is mommy?
Light brown.
Light brown? Okay, what color is daddy?
Skin color.
If somebody said to you, "Are you black? Are you white?" What would you say? Beige. I like that answer.
Yeah.
You constantly have people not understanding where to put you, not understanding when you don't fit into any of the buckets that they already know to exist for a certain ethnic group.
So it's like either box didn't work. I feel like nobody can just like be put in a box.
What I put down is hybrid.
Caramel.
My kids call themselves swirls.
Yeah.
I have no idea whether that offends people. They like it. So Leena and I are both in mixed marriages. Leena's husband is white. My husband is Caribbean, Trinidadian. My kids definitely look biracial. They don't look white. Oh, is that my breakfast? For me, this defining moment when my son was 3, we live in an area where the president's helicopter and plane fly over a lot.
Are you a dancing chef?
And he just said out of the blue, he said, "Oh, Mommy, I love President Barack Obama." I said, "Because he has a great helicopter, is that why you love him?" I just remember he looked right at me and he said, "No, Mommy, it's because he has brown skin like me." I realized I'm so clueless in what I should be learning.
You like your children.
I do like my children.
Go upstairs and show them your toys.
We can all play.
Whatever you want, buddy, as long as your parents say it's okay.
So in kindergarten, this was his self-portrait. And then in first grade, this became his self-portrait.
When we talk about race in America, it's the strong binaries of black and white. It leaves people like me really lost when you have a brown kid.
I started writing down questions like, here's all the things I want to know. How does racial identity happen? How does it happen when you're mixed race?
true. I have the Irish mom and the black dad.
Although Leena and I might be very conscious of race, we obviously don't know what it's like to be a mixed race person.
It's like, what kind of products do you have?
This is when I have braids. This is actually shine.
Why do you put all that stuff in your hair?
Well, it's because my hair is really curly.
We've got some awesome dolls that say Mixed Chicks Rock. They come in a variety of shades and tones.
What are our kids experiencing? What is that like for them?
What does that word race mean to you? What do you think about when you think about that word?
I think it means like that we're different, and when I was growing up, I thought race was a bad word.
What have we learned on this journey? We've learned an awful lot, but we've learned really about America's real cultural ambivalence about its mixed race reality, actually. So we just have 4 takeaways to share with you all today, and they start with...
So disgust. Disgust is a big word. It's a word we usually reserve for things like rotting garbage or lice, but unfortunately we found out that some people reserve this word for families like ours. In 2013, General Mills featured an interracial family in an ad for Cheerios. The ad went viral, but mainly because the comments had to be turned off because they were so vile. A few years later, Houstonia magazine had the same thing happen when they featured actually a real-life family in one of their ads. So Caty and I wanted to follow this notion of disgust, and we met and interviewed Dr. Allison Skinner, who's a psychologist. And what she found was that when specifically looking at a black and white couple, some white people, the same trigger of disgust happens to them. But here's our takeaway, and this is a good thing, is that she also told us that this was learned behavior, and we can actually do something to change it.
So when Leena and I learned that, we were like, oh, that's such a bummer. People looked at our families and were so cute.
Yeah.
Maybe some of them. So when you're in the majority group, it's hard to imagine and appreciate how much a positive portrayal of yourself, or really any portrayal at all, really matters to your development as a person and your self-esteem. So it's been almost 40 years since the first interracial family appeared on American television. That was the Jeffersons, for those of you paying attention. But since then, there are actually very few normalized portrayals of biracial people and interracial families just doing their everyday thing. And importantly, we're not talking about sexy interracial romances. We're talking about families and children. And here's why that matters, actually. We met a lot of kids when we were making our movie, as you could see, you saw some of them, and they don't see themselves portrayed on American television and in pop culture and in media. And this is really important because we know from many years of media research that media reflections of people really matters, not only in normalizing the experiences of the people who are portrayed, but the experiences for all of us to normalize their existence. And with connection comes the ability to empathize and understand, and that is the anti-disgust.
So mixed, mulatto, swirls. One thing that was unexpected that we learned was that language becomes very important to the mixed race identity. The first term that was used in this country to describe a mixed race person was the term mulatto. Some people really shy away from that term, given the legacy of slavery and its history. Others, we found, other biracial people are reclaiming that word and taking it on with the sense of the oppression, but also the triumphs that come with that. One thing that we learned, that Caty and I learned as parents and as a culture, that we do not, if we force our kids to pick one identity over another, we're actually creating harm to them. We're giving them stress, and we're giving them low self-esteem. So we cannot pick and choose the words that our kids or any biracial person uses to identify themselves.
So here's the really great news. So even if we mess this up, and parents mess up a lot of things, right? So even if we as parents and as the culture really don't get this right, biracial people actually have superpowers that inspire us. So we learned from a psychology scholar, Dr. Sarah Gaither, who was also biracial. We learned through her research that biracial people actually show less racial bias than the rest of us. They have racial identities that are fluid and flexible. They're able to maintain different perspectives. They're strong and they're resilient.
So another thing, Caty and I, while we've been going through this journey, a white woman, a brown woman, we learned some good things and we learned some not so good things. What we did discover is when we were contacting people to ask them to be in our film, I was contacting the people of color and Caty was contacting the white people. This unconscious bias and subconscious bias went so deep that when we were sitting next to people as they were being interviewed, I would sit next to the people of color, she would sit next to the white people. So much so, when I had Caty's family over to my house for dinner, she sat next to my white husband, and I sat next to her black husband. Right?
Maybe we didn't like our husbands.
Yeah. But here we are, we're two people who are deeply invested in race. We think about it as a practice, and we live it in our private lives. And if this subconscious and unconscious bias is so deep within us, what about all the people who aren't thinking about race in this way?
So at the heart of it, what Leena and I really hope to do with this project actually is not to show that we're experts, because we're not, but really to embrace and show our real vulnerability. That's one of the reasons why we're actually characters in our own film, because our questions are authentic, they are vulnerable, and they allow us to understand how much we don't know. So vulnerability, when we think about a social change project, can often be the most powerful force that we can embrace, because we know that vulnerability is the language of emotion and the spirit and humans. That is where social change happens, 50 years after a landmark law. Vulnerability demands that we care more about learning what we don't know than showing and patting ourselves on the back about what we do know. And that is the heart of our project. So I'll close with just one story that connects this idea of vulnerability and the idea of learning and change. So we were filming with a group of college students down in North Carolina, and they call themselves the Swirls. And this was a group that they formed to actually find some real conversation and solidarity, talking about their biracial experience. And I turned to a young man next to me, a 21-year-old biracial man, and I said, you know, I feel really embarrassed being, when I talk about race, I feel really self-conscious about it. My family is brown, and I am dealing with real racism in my life, but I feel so confused about it and embarrassed. Do I belong in this? And he said, of course you belong in it. You're already in it. Stop waiting for permission. But the other thing that he said that was so inspiring, actually, and so authentic, he said, but you have to understand that your job in any part of a racial justice movement, even this little tiny piece of it, your job is to listen. Your job is to be in the back of the line, not in the front of the line. At the back of the table, not at the front of the table, behind people of color. Just like I know that my light skin gives me a different kind of privilege, and I need to be there too. So that kind of vulnerability allows us to be in conversations that we would never have if we claimed that we had all of the answers, or that we're doing a good job about understanding race and racism, because we all have so much more to learn.
And we'll end with this. We know that our journey and our conversation is not magically going to solve all the issues around race in America. But we hope that if we can really see people as who they are, their genuine selves, that we can change the what are you to who are you. Thank you so much.